Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English 1110. This is K-Swizzle checking in for your Week 10 overview lecture, which is for the week of July 11th to July 17th. So let's go ahead and without further ado, dive into what we have for this week and really have a discussion as well about kind of what else is due for the rest of the month, since we are coming up on the end of our class together. So I've put together for you here a map of things that kind of represent what you need to do to finish out the semester. So you'll notice that it represents week 10, week 11, and week 12. And that's the amount of time that you really have left in this class. And to kind of talk through what it is that you need to do for each of those, I've put together kind of a little, flow chart. I don't know if that's the right word, but little boxes that kind of show each week at a glance, okay? So week 10, which is where we're at right now, you have 2 lectures focused on the third core assignment, which you need to make sure that you watch and review. And you have the annotated bibliography, which is due on Sunday, July 18th. As a reminder, July assignments can be turned in up until the last day of the month in July, but I do recommend that you try not to do all of the big assignments together at the end of the month because that gets really complicated. Week 11, which is next week, you have 2 lectures focused on the final project and semester reflection, with a deadline of Sunday, July 25th for discussion board post number 4. And finally, in week 12, you have no lectures and you have a deadline of the final project on Sunday, August 1st, and the semester reflection on Monday, August 2nd, okay? So what this tells you then is you have 4 and 4. You have 4 lectures left that you need to review, and you have 4 assignments left that you need to complete in order to finish out the semester. Now, this week's assignments is the last of 3 core assignments. If you recall, the concentrated close read was core assignment number 1, and the primary source analysis was core assignment number 2. And now we're on to the annotated bibliography. So after this week, you will be focusing exclusively on drafting and creating the English 1110 final project, right? Now, again, to kind of think about what you've got on the agenda for this week, you've got 2 lectures to watch, which are the overview and in-depth lectures, 1 core assignment to complete, which is the annotated bibliography, but you also have 1 assignment to begin thinking about that is due next week, which is discussion board post number 4. Now, very much like discussion board post number 3, where you were given a space to kind of sketch out what you might do for the primary source analysis, discussion board post 4 is the same concept except for the final project. So it's pretty low stakes, but it is kind of an intentional space for you to think through your ideas. Now, I do want to pause here and emphasize for you a few things that are going to be really important as we move forward. Now, I'm going to be out of town during week 11 of the semester, which is Sunday, July 18th through Saturday, July 24th. I will have access to email on July 18th, but I will be unable to be reached the rest of the week and will not hold office hours that week. So if you are planning to check in with me during office hours or via email with questions or assignment drafts, please make a plan to either do so during week 10 or week 12. That is not in week 11 because you won't hear back from me during that time. And I did want to also kind of note, and I also apologize if you can hear my cats being super loud in the background, scratching on their scratch post, that my final rounds of synchronous office hours will be Monday, July 12th from 11 o'clock a.m. to 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern, which if you're listening to this lecture on the Monday that it's posted, it's the same day. And then my only other set of office hours will be Monday, July 26th from 11 o'clock a.m. to 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern, okay? So again, I will not really be available next week to talk via email. I won't have office hours. I won't be reviewing drafts. So if you have any concerns or questions about these major assignments, you've got this week and 2 weeks from now to check in with me, okay? Sometimes I do want to also note that sometimes students wait until the last minute to reach out to me. And I just want to remind you that just because you email me the night that the assignment is due or at the last minute, you're under a time crunch. But I've been hosting office hours the whole month and I've been available via email, right? So I just want to remind you that I am also a person with things going on. And so if, you send along a message that's not so nice at the end of the month, it's tricky on my part because it's sort of like, I can only do so much in terms of offering to be available. And so I just want to remind you to be kind and, understanding and compassionate towards me as well, that I'm also doing the best I can to make sure that I'm available for you. But also I want to remind you that the monthly flexible deadlines have been designed to try to give you as much time as possible. And so I don't have the most patience when it comes to assignments, like, kind of students trying to submit assignments after the hard deadline. So again, if you're not submitting July work, by July, like last day of July at 11:59 p.m. Eastern, I will be frustrated, okay? So just things to consider. Please meet the monthly deadline. Please don't be a few minutes over or an hour over. I won't accept the work. I get incredibly frustrated when students try to kind of scoot that deadline even further when I've literally given you the entire month to do all of your assignments, okay? So please keep all of these things in your back pocket. You've only got a couple weeks left to submit all your July work. I'll be available this week and 2 weeks from now via office hours and email, but I won't be available next week. So let's talk about the core assignment deadline for this week, which is the annotated bibliography. Now this counts for 100 points. And again, it's the third of 3 core assignments in this course. And core assignments count for a total of 450 points towards your grade. So they're a pretty massive chunk. Now, the recommended weekly deadline for this assignment is Sunday, July 18th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern to Carmen. But if you would like to turn it in by the end of the month, you have until Saturday, July 31st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern to Carmen. I will not accept the assignment if it comes in at 12:01, at 12:05, 12:10. I've had a couple students kind of try to push those deadlines. I'm not doing it for July. Please adhere to the entire deadline, not parts of it, okay? So let's talk about this annotated bibliography prompt. So the annotated bibliography is designed with the following learning objectives in mind, which are to introduce you to the process of preparing a works cited page in MLA format, to give you the opportunity to read and familiarize yourself with secondary sources related to your primary source, to reflect on and plan out how you might incorporate secondary research most effectively into an essay if you were to pursue the final paper option of the semester final project. Your work should be submitted as single-spaced, typed in 12-point font, and set to 1-inch margins. It should be submitted as a Word document or as a PDF. I do want to also flag here that if you do not have proper header format, proper title, proper page numbers, all of those different things that I spent time talking through in the writing strategy lecture, you will be marked down points. So please make sure that you follow formatting correctly, because we have devoted some time to talking through what formatting looks like, okay? So again, the purpose of doing the annotated bibliography is to get you to kind of learn how to do a works cited page in MLA format, to give you a chance to look at secondary sources that relate to the primary source that you just wrote about in the PSA, and to help you kind of reflect and plan out how you would potentially incorporate secondary research into a longer version of the PSA that you just produced, which some of you might ultimately choose to pursue if you decide to do the final project prompt related to writing a longer essay, but more on that later. Now the prompt reads, creating an annotated bibliography consists of researching and compiling a list of secondary sources that are relevant to your primary source in some way. These secondary sources should do at least one of the following: supplement the central argument of your project, help you to establish the socio-political or historical context for the text, offer additional insight on the creator's background or personal history, provide background information on the publication history or distribution of the text, offer data or relevant information on how audiences responded to the text at the time of its release. So this is kind of an overview of the types of information that would be helpful or useful to have from a secondary source and incorporate into a research essay. Okay, so again, your secondary sources that you select for this assignment don't need to do all of these things, but they should each do at least one of these different things, right? Add to your argument, help you add context or background information, give you more insight onto kind of the creator themselves, give you more insight onto when the text was published or how it was distributed, or perhaps offer information about, how audiences engaged with this particular text. So then in terms of kind of thinking about this assignment in steps, I ask that you please follow the following steps. Please complete the following steps, okay? And so your first step is find 2 to 3 secondary sources that are timely, useful, credible, and relevant to the argument you are making about your primary source. There's not going to necessarily be a difference between having 2 or 3. Some students end up finding more, but you just need to find 2 to 3, okay? At least one of these sources should be from a scholarly, peer-reviewed journal or from an academic book, which I'll talk about in the in-depth lecture of how to find. And the other 1 to 2 sources can be any of the following. Maybe it's an article from a news site such as The Atlantic or the New York Times, an interview with the creator of your text that is uploaded to YouTube or available on a podcast, an article in a print or online magazine that talks about social issues such as Salon or Time Magazine, a documentary, an entry on a museum website, such as National Museum of African American History and Culture or MoMA Learning, okay? So 2 to 3 secondary sources. At least one should be from a scholarly peer-reviewed journal. The other 1 to 2 sources should be some sort of kind of popular press writing, which means that it's available to the public through a popular press format. And again, the point with having these secondary sources is that you are looking into, articles, interviews, supplemental materials really that help to extend and enhance the argument that you made in the primary source analysis, okay? And so you at kind of a minimum need to have 2 sources. At maximum, you need to have 3 sources, though some students I have found will occasionally kind of come together with, 4 secondary sources in their annotated bibliography if they find a couple that they don't want to part with, or if they're planning to write about, this paper again, or kind of, rework this paper in the final project, and they want more secondary sources completed in advance. But again, bare minimum 2 sources, maximum 3 sources. It can sometimes be ideal to have 3 sources just because it gives you a little bit more breadth, okay? Now, as you research sources, it is fine to skim them initially, but plan to reread the secondary sources you select for the annotated bibliography. The next phase of the research process is to set aside time to thoroughly and attentively read these sources. As you read these sources, take extensive notes by summarizing the text topic, synthesizing the central argument or message, and identifying the evidence used to supplement the argument or message, if any. Make a note for yourself as to how the source relates to your primary source and what drew you to it initially. These notes will be helpful when you go to write the annotation for each source. So initially you can skim them, but you're going to need to read them in really intensive depth to make sure that you know the argument really well, to know that you know the pieces of the text really well, and that you can work with it in the course of producing your annotated bibliography, okay? And again, taking extensive notes, while tedious and sometimes boring, can be something that actually makes the assignment go by much quicker, because you can refer back to your notes when you actually ultimately go to write the assignment itself. Now, for each source, create a correctly formatted works cited entry in MLA style. For help on how to write each entry, review the video lecture and supplemental Google Slides for the Week 10 in-depth lecture, which is available on our Carmen page. After each entry, create an annotation for each source. These annotations should be thorough and detailed, 300 to 500 words per source. In each annotation, you should follow the acronym DISCA: describe, summarize, connect, and anticipate. Describe the source, where it comes from, who wrote it, how a reader might determine its reliability, etc. Summarize. Provide a detailed summary of the author's main argument. For instance, do not simply say that an article is about personal confidence. What specifically does the article say about personal confidence? Demonstrate that you understand the central argument each source is making. Connect. Detail how you see the secondary source connecting to either your primary source itself or a broader topic suggested by your primary source. Explain this connection thoroughly to your reader and be as specific as possible. Anticipate. Discuss how this source may relate to your argument and how you might use the source in a revision of the PSA that includes secondary source integration. Explain why you feel it would be productive to use the source in this way. So if you recall, when we talked about the concentrated close read and the primary source analysis, I encouraged you to write in the format of treat, right? Where it kind of took you through, these are the sequences of writing your various body paragraphs. In a similar capacity, you can think about the annotation for each entry in your annotated bibliography as being something comparable to a treat format, except you're using DISCA as your sequence, okay? And the reason that you're going to use DISCA is because it's going to make sure that you address all parts of the secondary source that would be useful and important for you in the process of making use of this source in a research paper in the future, okay? And so I do want to flag, and I'll talk more about this kind of in the in-depth lecture, that I oftentimes find that students will kind of use most of their word count in the summarize section, which is not ideal, because what ends up happening is then you're just summarizing the source instead of actually analyzing its usefulness and kind of evaluating, how the author or producer of this text is putting together their own message or argument. So I do encourage you right now to be sure that you concentrate a lot of your intellectual labor on the connect and anticipate sides, because the describe and summarize are not intended to take up all of your word count, okay? Now, some questions you might consider as you develop the anticipate section of your annotation would be, how will you use this source in future writing? Will it support your argument, complicate it, disagree with it, or something else? What material will you use from the secondary source? Why do you feel that specific material would be particularly compelling, effective, or useful to your argument? What elements of the source might you quote, paraphrase, or summarize? What do you feel would be the rhetorical impact of presenting the information in this way? How might you introduce the source in text? What might be the rhetorical impact of introducing the source in different ways? So you don't need to specifically address each one of these. This is kind of a question guide, very similar to what I did for the comics and zine process post. But the idea here is that these questions are intended to help you kind of think about, especially in that anticipate section in the DISCA approach to your annotations, what is the function or usefulness of the source that you've identified that's related to your primary source? How would you actually make use of it in the course of your, future essay? Now, points to keep in mind. Keep in mind that research is not an exact science. Be patient and flexible throughout the process. For some of the primary sources you might be analyzing, there may be very few secondary sources that discuss your primary source directly. Consider your primary source from multiple angles. Think about broader conversations your primary source might suggest. And employ the OSU Library's website, including databases such as Academic Search Complete, LexisNexis, or Google Scholar, as well as WorldCat at OSU, to find useful, timely, relevant, and credible electronic or print sources. And I encourage you to see the library link on our course Common page for a list of databases. Now, really quickly, I just want to preview for you for next week that you do have discussion board post number 4. Now, discussion board post number 4 is your final discussion board post for the class and is worth 15 points. And this assignment is designed as a low stakes opportunity to begin thinking about your final project for English 1110. It is intended to be a casual exploratory draft in which you review the prompt for the final project and discuss which project option or options you are drawn to. This discussion board post could be structured as a formal blueprint, that is an outline, in which you begin writing out how you would pair an option from menu A of the final project prompt with an option from menu B. It could also be structured as a reflection on how you might revise the concentrated close read, CCR, or primary source analysis, PSA, into a longer essay that integrates secondary sources into the argument. So again, this is going to be just kind of a, stream of consciousness exploratory draft type post where you have room to kind of talk about, I've reviewed the prompt for the final project. Here's what I'm thinking of pairing together. And if I'm thinking about using either the concentrated close read or the primary source analysis and expanding on it, which you can do for this assignment, here's what I'm kind of thinking about doing and perhaps what kinds of secondary sources I'm planning to incorporate. Okay. Now, the discussion board post should be a minimum of 250 words and a maximum of 500 words. It should be posted to the discussions tab on Carmen and can take the form of bullet points, a list, sentence clusters, a paragraph, basically any form that is conducive to your thinking and brainstorming. So just keep that in the back of your mind that that is something you'll be responsible for next week. But in the interim, all you've got to think about is this annotated bibliography and how you use it to build on what you've already done in the PSA. All right, everyone, that's everything that I have for you today in English 1110. I hope that this lecture was helpful, and I will see you again in the in-depth lecture, okay? Take care and have a good rest of your week. Bye.